Welcome everybody to Forza Horizon 4, and today we're taking a look at the 1924 Austin 7. Now this was produced between 1923 and 1939 with around 290,000 being sold. It was available as a two-door saloon, two-door cabriolet, two-door coupe or a two-door tourer like this version, as well as a three-door van. And it was not only a car that was so cheap that it made the motor car available to the masses, but it also helped establish three other car manufacturers like BMW, Lotus and Nissan, as all three of those companies based their first cars on this Austin 7. Obviously they weren't called the Austin 7 in their own respects, but the BMW, for instance, was called the BMW Dixie. But yeah, this car helped set up those companies, and it also was a basis for Bruce McLaren's first ever race car. Again, an influential kind of thing, because he was obviously one of the great racing car drivers. And it did a lot for the car industry in Britain in the same way that the Model T did from Ford, as that was also cheap and brought the car to the masses. And but unlike that Ford Model T, this was actually shorter. It was 25 inches shorter in its wheelbase at 75 inches, and it weighed half as much as the Ford Model T, meaning that this was a far more appealing economy car than that Ford ever would have been. And it's also the oldest car that we've ever had on a Forza game, beating out the Bugatti Type 35C by 2 whole years, meaning we're closer now to the 1910s than we've ever been with any other car on the Forza series. And it's clearly an archaic car in a lot of ways, just by looking at the interior. As you can see, the door really isn't a door, it's a flap merely, and the seats are deeply looking uncomfortable, to be honest. And the roof looks hideously complicated to pull down. There's no boot, you just got a spare wheel at the back there. And there's not much in terms of luxury comforts at all. You've got what is a voltmeter on the right there, and you've got your speedometer all the way over on the left there. Or it's a speedometer, I think, or it's a rev counter. I think it's more likely a speedometer, to be honest. But for whatever reason, it's all the way over there where the passenger is. And you can tell by the mechanics of this thing that there really isn't much going for it. But unlike the Ford Model T, this has a gearbox in the right position that you'd normally expect, a handbrake and 3 pedals, your accelerator, your brake and the clutch, all in the right positions, unlike the Ford Model T, which was hideously complicated. And even though it has twice the power of this and way more cubic capacity, it was a far more hideously complicated car. So this really did popularise the whole driving layout that you're used to today. And even though it does have a starting handle, it did have an electric starting motor, but starter motors back then wouldn't have been the most reliable of things, so you got the starter handle there to be a backup mode to help get the car going. Engine wise, well, it's really rather small. It's got a 748cc inline 4 engine, producing 10 horsepower and 28 pounds-feet of torque. But because it only weighs 772 pounds, you're not really having much in the way of weight to deal with to haul this car around. So 10 horsepower might not seem a lot, but it's more than a horse would have been. It's more than a horse-drawn carriage, and it's obviously a far easier form of transport than either of those would have been. But it's archaic in so many ways as well, outside as well as inside. You got extremely thin tyres, you got the tiniest brakes that I've ever seen on a car, and obviously they're not going to be boosted or anything like that, and they are going to be drum brakes as well. So they are extremely archaic. The suspension is pretty much out of a horse-drawn carriage, to be honest. It bounces around a hell of a lot. The Horizon license plate and braking light would not have been standard, so you didn't have any braking lights at all on this. And I'm pretty sure those lights, even on the front there, probably were standard at some point, but I doubt they would have had 2 of them. Even if they did, I doubt they would have been all that reliable or all that useful either. Extremely archaic, but I am extremely glad that this is on this game, because I have been dying for more cars from the 1920s, as it is a revolutionary period in car history. as evidenced by this and all the other things that it helped set up, car companies, racing drivers, and the British motor industry in general, as Austin were mostly known for their large cars at this point. Cars that had far more horsepower than this, were far larger, but also far more expensive. This is the equivalent of £9,000 in today's money, which I know sounds like a lot, but obviously cars have gotten better while they've still been cheaper. But £9,000 in today's money is still really rather cheap for a brand new car. So yeah, you can imagine that this would have been an easily affordable vehicle at the time. So yeah, really pleased that it's on this game, and I just hope that we get more cars from this period, to be honest, because we've only got 3 cars now from the 1920s in the Forza series. We've had the Bugatti for a long time, but yeah, it's only been recently that we've had another 1920s cars in the form of a Mercedes-Benz, and now we've got this Austin. So we've only got 3 from the 1920s, but I hope that increases in time. But nonetheless, let's get out onto the open road and see what this car can do. So yeah, 10 horsepower from a microscopic little engine means that this car is far from quick. And as you can see, it barely revs as well. It's not even getting up to 3,000 RPM. But because it weighs so little, it's more than capable of getting up to far greater speeds than any horse-drawn carriage or horseback ride or whatever get up to. As you can see, it gets up, it doesn't do 0 to 60, and yeah, because it's only got a top speed of 50. So if you've got a steep hill, you might get up to 65, but you will be revving the engine to its max and risk, well, you would in real life risk damaging the engine. So yeah, 50 is about all this car can do. But 50 is all you really ever needed to do, because you would be unlikely to be driving this out in the country, because there weren't really any roads back in the 1920s in the countryside. There were certainly no motorways, so you didn't really have to worry about any of that. And yeah, at the end of the day, you'd mostly be driving this around cities, because cities were again still filled with horses, horse-drawn carriages, weren't really all that well managed in terms of road traffic or anything like that. 50 mile an hour is plenty, to be honest, especially since again roads weren't all that great. Suspension on this certainly isn't all that great. The brakes aren't all that good either. Yeah, it doesn't weigh all that much, but it still doesn't have the best brakes. And yeah, you know, 50 mile an hour is fairly a decent amount of speed for the early 1920s from such a cheap car, quite frankly. And yeah, on top of all that, it's extremely small, so it can thread through all of the narrow streets that would have been around in cities in the UK at the time. London was radically different in terms of its road network in the 1920s, so yeah, a small car like this would have been highly beneficial, and yeah, far more useful than a large car would have been. The kind of large cars that Austin were making, for instance. So yeah, I imagine this is going to annoy a lot of people that this is in the game, because it's not a supercar, it barely does any kind of speed or anything like that. But for me, as a car enthusiast, I find this to be highly interesting, and yeah, a great addition to the game. And yeah, I hope other people enjoy it. You get it via doing the recently added Super 7, which is a game mode that where you do certain challenges that have been made via other people. I'll quickly show you it off. It's they're dotted around as well on the map, but you can also go to a house here, Super 7. I'll just fast travel there for you. And yeah, you work your way through up the levels doing different challenges. You can choose the challenges that you want to do. You can swap out a challenge that is available for another one if you're not interested in it or you've already done it. And then you can basically progress and get money, get influence and the like, and contribute towards doing anything. So yeah, I've currently done a load of these already, as you can see by my progress. So yeah, there's 7 per thing, and then you just get extra influence for doing it. And as you can see, as we go here, you have certain levels to go where you work your way up. Yeah, this is level 5. It took me a while to get to it, but it was worth it for the car. And look what we got at level 7, a Triumph TR7, which I am also equally looking forward to. So yeah, you'll see a review of that when I eventually get up to that, but it does take a while to gain influence via the Super 7 you know, mode, as yeah, you get varying amounts of influence. I've had as low as 200 influence all the way up to nearly 3,000. So yeah, it's all about picking the right challenges to get the right kind of influence. But yeah, it's well worth getting going through all those challenges, because there are some fun challenges in there. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting this car and eventually the Triumph. As yeah, I've been always wanting more 1920s cars, like I've said, and this is easily one of the more iconic ones from that period. Especially if you're not really knowledgeable in cars, you probably would have heard of this at some point. But nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.